Good morning and welcome to the Sexy Aging podcast. Today I have my special guest, Aamilah Begum, who's going to be sharing with us one of the cultural discussions around menopause. And this is something that I've really wanted to dive into. But just to give some context, I spent 18 years living in a Muslim country in Malaysia. Some of my dearest and closest friends are Muslim. And we never spoke about menopause. Now, I was going through it, and just towards the back end of leaving Malaysia, I realized exactly what it was, but still never really had a conversation, whether it was lighthearted or heart to heart, around what that meant for women in the Muslim community. And so I have my special guest today who's going to help us unpack that and understand it. So, Aamilah, you come from a law background, and you've got quite a
That's
few
right.
things going on. I'll just read out a couple of things. You're a radio and TV presenter. You're the director of the Endometriosis Foundation. I know I have some listeners on the podcast that are quite curious about that topic. And you're a menopause advocate and coach. And I think anytime we're on LinkedIn or social media and you see someone else in this space, you want to connect, right? And find out,
Absolutely.
what's your angle? How are you going with that? So do you want to elaborate a little bit more about your background and how you came into the menopause space?
Yes, of course. Thank you, first of all, Tracy, for having me and being patient with me because we've been trying for a while to get this conversation going. And thank you for reaching out and recognizing that menopause is something within the Muslim community that is approached very differently. And wanting to have this conversation, and I'm really, really excited. And yes, those introductions. I've actually stepped down from the role of director of Endometriosis Foundation, and I'll come back to that because that's where my journey started with endometriosis. So I'll come to where I am now. Endometriosis, I had endometriosis for about probably just over 2 decades. That's what I was suffering with. I didn't know. There was a lot of different appointments, different consultants, different hospitals, painful conversations, rejection in terms of consultants saying, well, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing we can do. A misdiagnosis, an investigative surgery, laparoscopic investigative surgery, which came back and said there was nothing, they found nothing wrong. I was told by my medical consultant that there's nothing gynecologically wrong with you. And there was a suggestion about going down the road of antidepressants. So I declined, and being the advocate, vocal person that I am, as part of my radio show, I did quite a few series around endometriosis. And in one of my series, I think it was the very first one, I made reference to a consultant named Shaheen Ghazali, who is based in the UK. So just to give context, I live in Birmingham, and Shaheen Ghazali's clinic is around about 100 miles from where I am. So I went back and pulled my notes out from the radio show, and I thought, right, this is the consultant that I need to go and see, because his approach is very patient-led, not kind of protocol-driven. We're going to do this and then this and then this. Is very patient-led. So I went to see him. I got my records from the hospital where I was told there was nothing wrong with me. I took my file with me and copies of the images from the laparoscopic surgery, and he looked at these black and white images, and he said to me, that's endometriosis.
Yeah. Wow. What a relief for you to finally get that
Yeah.
confirmation. What's
Yeah.
really ironic is in these situations with women, and you say patient-led, we're often compelled to go into the internet and try to find out the things. And then you realize, oh, a lot of these symptoms are lining up for me. Why is it that the doctor can't see it too? And when you even mention it, and this is a lot of where, women get pushed back in the health in their consultations, where you go, well, I believe it could be this. Can we investigate that further? I think you kind of, while we're not trained doctors, you kind of know that there's something not quite right. And of course, we all speak amongst ourselves, and you go, do you get these periods like this?
Yeah.
Like, are your periods so painful that you're in bed for 2 days? That's just wrong, isn't it? So,
It is, yeah. And I think often as well we're told, well, you just get on with it. And I think there's a huge gender disparity in the health community, amongst the health professionals. There is a huge gender disparity. And I think as women, we're seen like we're just really strong and we get on with it, or we're seen as like they just moan about everything.
Yeah.
And you're either in one or the other. Why don't you just get on with it? Oh, here she comes again, she's moaning. And I think as women who go to see our medical professionals, we're not given that time, we're not given that consideration. And so often it falls on us to do the research, to have the conversations and find the spaces where we can go and have these conversations so we can make sure we're going in the right direction. So fast forward, this was in July 2018. And once he had confirmed that it was endometriosis, there was a sigh of relief. Like, right, it's not in my head. You were wrong. I didn't need antidepressants. So let's move on. Where do we go from here? And I wanted to have a hysterectomy. It's a decision that I made. I wanted the quality of my life back because endometriosis had debilitated me. It took my legal career away from me. I was so close to qualifying and finishing and coming on the role of registered solicitors, and I had to give that up because my health meant that I couldn't do it. I couldn't get out of bed. I was debilitated, the fatigue, all the other symptoms that came with it. And so I had my surgery in actually 4th of June 2019. So 4 days and a day ago. Like I didn't even
Wow.
realize it was yesterday, would have been 4 years.
Wow.
So I had my hysterectomy, and before I had my hysterectomy, I did a lot of research. I read up on medical books. I actually bought a medical book myself, the handbook guide that doctors, medical professionals will carry around with them. So I bought that and I read through it. So I kind of knew what I was to expect after a hysterectomy and all around hysterectomy and HRT. But even though I kind of knew, I wasn't prepared.
Right. Well, we've
And
actually got 3 episodes on this topic. So
okay, wow.
hysterectomy and surgical menopause. So I'm really curious as to your experience. So yeah, let's go.
So one of the things that it says in the book is that if you take, obviously you've got the full hysterectomy where you have everything taken out, the uterus, the fallopian tubes, cervix, the ovaries, and then you have the partial hysterectomy where you still preserve some of that. So I preserved my ovaries, and my instructions to my doctor, my consultant, was that if my ovaries are healthy, keep it. I'm going to leave it to your professional judgment. So my ovaries were healthy, had the surgery, removed the endometriosis, removed my uterus, my cervix, and my fallopian tubes, and my ovaries were still there. But what the medical book said is that during the process of the surgery, blood supply is disconnected to the ovaries because of the procedure that they have to do. And in that moment, the ovaries have a mind of their own. And if they decide, well, actually, you've disrupted me and I don't like what you've done to me, so I'm not going to come back on. That's me done with you.
I'm going to ignore you.
Yeah, that's me done with you. Relationship over, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll come back on. Yeah. So my ovaries, after about 2 months or so, became apparent that it wasn't coming back on. And
woohoo, here comes the roller coaster.
Yeah, I started to experience a whole, like, it was just this crazy symptoms that were going on. And even though I knew, I wasn't connecting it. And probably that was because there's a part of me that was in denial. No, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen because you've got your ovaries. And I went to see my doctor. The first doctor laughed me off and he said to me, it's all in your head. I don't know why you think you're going into menopause. It's not possible. So I chose to terminate that medical consultation and I walked out the room. Then I went back to another doctor and I did my research, and we have something in the UK which is called the NICE guidelines, the National Institute of Clinical Excellence. So I went to there and it says a woman who's had a hysterectomy, if she has got symptoms, or even if she hasn't had a hysterectomy, if she's got symptoms and she's of that age of menopause, then you refer them to a menopause specialist. And so I went to my GP and says I need to get referred to a menopause specialist. Around about September, October time, my symptoms were getting worse. So palpitations, waking up, thinking this is it, this is my last breath I'm about to take. And as a Muslim, we put a lot of emphasis on the latter part of, like, when you're in the moment of death and the things that we're supposed to read. And, and I don't think it's just as Muslims, as anybody, when you're faced with, you think you're being faced with death. so many things come rushing to you,
Yeah.
to low moods, to the best way to describe it is like I became a stranger in my own life. So things were going on and I couldn't connect to them. I couldn't connect to people. I couldn't make sense of it. You know, the brain fog, the fatigue, the bone, the aching body, all of these, like, it was a multitude of symptoms. And then it was like having a conversation with a friend of mine, Heidi. And Heidi, I met through the Endometriosis Foundation. Not the Endometriosis Foundation, but the Endometriosis Journey. And I interviewed Heidi on the radio, and that's how we became good friends. And Heidi had also had hysterectomy. And it's only when Heidi said to me, like, Aamilah, it sounds like you're going through menopause. And I was like, right, okay. And so fast forward, that was in September 2019. Went to my GP. By November, I had a referral to a menopause specialist, and I went to see my menopause specialist in February 2020, and that's when I started HRT.
So right before COVID.
Just right before COVID.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
you scored the jackpot then, because I was in perimenopause during COVID and not knowing what it was. And I just felt like there was a high level of stress associated with lockdowns and kids at home and stuff like that. But I was, waking up, night sweats, all of that stuff, not knowing what it was. And that was during COVID. So, I think that you hit the jackpot.
Yeah, I got it just in because we had the lockdown that started in March.
Yeah.
And then what I found is, where do I go to find out information, like real information, not leaflet information or Google information? Like, where do I go to find real, authentic information? Where do I go to find the women? Well, and then I realized there are no spaces. There are no conversations that I can have.
Yep.
And, you said something about, like, in the Muslim community, why don't we talk about it? And I found, like, even my non-Muslim friends, having conversations with them, they're like, we don't talk about menopause. My mum doesn't talk about menopause. It's a conversation we're just told to get on with it. We've done it, you do it. And through my menopause specialist that I went to see during COVID, contacted me and said, we're doing an interview. There's a lady called Fiona who runs the menopause school. She's doing an interview, and can you come on as a guest? And we did an online interview. I think I did a couple of interviews with them. And that's when I realized, well, actually, I need to create the spaces. If I can't find the spaces, they're not there. Yeah. And there's only so much, like, in the UK, we've got Davina McCall and who talks a lot about menopause and raising awareness, and there's conversations, but it gets only up to a certain point, then I can't connect, because that, like you said, the Muslim woman aspect and the journey of the Muslim woman in menopause, it kind of stops then, and where do you go from there? So I thought, right, I'm going to create the space, I'm going to create the conversations, and I'm going to do all of that. So May 2022, last year, even though I'd been doing the work on and off, not on and off, I'd been doing the work, but not under like a banner or a heading or anything like that. I then decided, I'm going to put this in, and I'm going to set up my own organization. So I set up a not-for-profit organization, Menopause Talk, and I do workshops, doing online Q&A. I have women I speak to on a one-to-one basis. And the list is going on. And in my very first workshop, I think was done in October. It was in October, and I've done about 5, maybe 6 workshops since, and have supported around, so far had conversations and interacted with just around 200 women.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's so satisfying, isn't it? We're very similar. Yeah. I did my first live workshop in October last year. And since then, it's been literally every 2 weeks or something. There's something that's come up, someone gets in touch, and it's like an online workshop, or it's a live in New Zealand, and it's so satisfying to be able to see the people in front of you, and the penny drops when you mention a few things about what to expect. But I think one of the most satisfying things, I don't know if you're in this experience, but when there are men in the room and it's a workshop, and it should be that way anyway, because this is not an exclusive conversation for women only. But I found that when there are men in the room, it's like the penny drops for them and the light goes on, like, oh, this is what's happening with my partner or my wife. Oh,
Yes.
well, that
Yes.
explains that conversation, or that explains why she's acting like that, you know? And then when they come up and they go, hey, thank you, you've actually helped me so much, you realize menopause is more than just a physical issue for women. It's actually a relational, career, you know, it just pervades across everything. And if we're not having the conversation, then it's not helping anybody, is
it? Absolutely, Tracy. You know, it's physical, it's emotional, it's psychological, it's societal, it's familial, and the list goes on. And I haven't had any workshops yet. It is in the pipeline, on request, on demand, to do something with the men are involved. However, give me any opportunity to talk about menopause, and I will talk about it.
I'm
And
with
when
you,
I hear,
girl.
when the men hear me, when
Yeah.
the men hear what I have to say, you're right, the penny drops. And a lot of things, not just for their partner, but also for their mother,
Mom,
for their
their
sisters,
sister,
for their friends,
yeah,
for the women, the menopausing women around them. And like Fiona, who says, you know, the people who you live with are your co-menopausers.
yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so they have to know. So, and you know, you talked about not talking about it in you know, the conversations in the Muslim, amongst the Muslim community and the women. And I initially thought it was just that, but it isn't. And I sit, like I said, I sit with my non-Muslim friends, and we have the same issue. And then Fiona, in her training and her work that she does, like, has this amazing quote, and I'm going to keep referencing back to Fiona because I've learned so much from her and through her. And she says, we don't talk about menopause because we don't talk about menstruation. And we don't talk about menstruation because nobody taught us how to.
That's really, really good point. Yeah, so we're all kind of floundering our way around how to have the conversation, how to be inclusive. You know, like, that's actually a good point. Yeah.
Because if we talked about menstruation when we had the menstruation, talking about menopause would be a natural thing. So it feels quite natural. Like, periods are seen as something dirty. Periods are seen as something, ugh, you know.
Yeah.
And so we associate, you know, when something is and something is seen as dirty, the concept of shame comes with that. Like, this is almost like a shame in periods. But actually there isn't. It's a natural process, it's a natural cycle. And then as a woman, you know, a woman of faith, a Muslim woman, we say that it's a gift, it's something from God. It's how He's created you. He's made you special because the women have it. So there's something about you, and you are also the woman who holds the womb. The woman holds the womb. You have the portal that brings life into this world.
Yeah.
But you have to go through this process of shedding and the periods and everything else in order to be able to also, you know, there's a lot that the body is holding and having to go through because we have that portal that brings life into this world, right? Sorry, I've lost my chain of thought now.
It's okay. It's completely normal here.
Normal, yeah. So I was talking about shame. So the shame, we start because we look at periods as a really bad thing, or, you know, it's not even acknowledged when young girls say, right, I can't come into school, or miss, I've got really bad period pains. We don't listen to them, we invalidate them straight away.
Yeah.
And so it's almost in a young girl is growing up thinking like periods are something that you don't talk about. There's no space for them.
Yeah. I remember that being the case when I was younger, but that's certainly not the case that I've experienced now. I have an 18-year-old, and as she was going through puberty, she was very open, and all her friends very open, easy discussion, very relaxed about the fact that they were having periods or what was happening for them. So I personally feel, I don't know whether it's country or culture based, that conversation is way more acceptable. And even at school, she said, I kind of asked her, we did an interview on the podcast together where we talked about periods and perimenopause, and she said, no, the boys are great. They're good with it. They're good. They're here.
You're right. I think it's a country thing.
Yeah.
I think it's a country thing. We're still not there yet here in the UK. And so when this young girl now goes through her menopausing journey, and let's face it, menstruation is part of the menopausing journey, because menopause is the upside down of menstruation, right?
Mm-hmm.
During menstruation, your hormones are going up, and during menopause, your hormones are coming down. So it's
Correct.
the upside down, right? So when we have shame associated with it, you come to menopause, you don't talk about it.
Yeah, it all comes back. Yeah. All
Yeah.
the shame. Yeah. Like, oh gosh, this is another thing that we're not going to talk about. We're going to whisper about this one as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you'll hear things like, the shame element of it. It's just like, oh gosh, she's probably going through menopause. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
the mood and the hot sweats and the frustrations and the forgetfulness. And then you get labeled, or you think it's a label, and labels are often seen as something that are not good things.
Yeah.
And so it's the shame culture of it that takes us away from talking about menopause.
Yeah.
And I think, and I know in the Muslim community, and it's not, I wouldn't say so much in the Muslim community, but it depends on, again, which culture you're from. Because you might be Arab, you might be South Asian, you might be, from Malaysia, but depending on which part of the world you're from. And I think when we talk about the word shame, in not even like, I don't even think it's the word shame, but it's more like there's an etiquette of it's called haya. The word is haya, and it's that etiquette of how do I explain it now? How do I explain it? It's not even shame. It's not, because shame is like you have there's a negative connotation. So haya is like modesty.
I was
That's probably the best.
feeling like it was
Yeah.
privacy that you were
Yeah,
trying to explain.
privacy and
Yeah.
modesty,
Yeah.
and the way that
Yeah.
we conduct ourselves as women, and it comes for men, not just for women. Haya is something that also comes for men, not just for women. But I think the focus is so much on women, and then you probably find this in other communities. There's a lot of focus on women, and the way women are, and the way women conduct themselves, and the way women behave, and the way women are exposed or not exposed. For whatever reason, we're an exciting topic in every culture and every community that you can go
Yeah.
to. And I think as we take that concept of haya, we take that concept of modesty, and we bring it in, like we're not supposed to have conversations around period. We're not supposed to have these, but actually we are, because there's no shame. There's no shame in periods. There's no shame in menopause. And we as Muslims believe that Prophet Muhammad was the last prophet, and he brought so many teachings with him. And he would sit with women. The women would come to him and ask him advice on periods. He would sit with them and give them advice on period. And there's so much references historically in the religion of Islam around women and periods and childbirth, and everything relating to women, from intimacy, whatever you can think of. There were conversations there, but we've taken this concept of modesty, and it's almost kind of like moved so far away from what it should be and what it was. And because of that, I think Muslim women, we think we shouldn't talk about it,
Yeah.
because it means that we're compromising on our modesty.
Yeah. Yeah, you've explained that so beautifully. And I was really touched by you explaining how when the Prophet would sit with the woman and talk about the periods and childbirth and all of that stuff. Are you able to elaborate a little bit more about that, which is from an Islam perspective? If we really dive back, obviously, to the teachings of the Prophet, what is the perspective on menopause when it comes to living in today's world as a Muslim woman and understanding that menopause is a normal stage of life? What do you understand? I don't even know what I want to say, but I think you kind of get the gist.
That's a really, really good question, Tracy.
Yeah.
That's a really, really good question. And do you know what? It's a question that I often ask myself, and I'm still looking for the answers to that. Yeah. And I am not like learned and in Islamic history and knowledgeable, so I'm not going to even attempt to answer that. But I am looking for the answers. And I know that there's emphasis on women, the natural menopause, the emphasis on women in taking rest. Even like I know there's a verse in the Quran, which we believe again is the direct words of God. There is a verse in the Quran, and I don't remember which one it is. And I don't remember for certain, and I'm still seeking and waiting for clarity on that. But there is actually a verse in the Quran which says that women who have gone up to a certain age and they're no longer looking for marriage, and they're no longer uh, of that age where they're going to be able to marry and what have you not, they can actually remove the headscarf. And I don't know what the translation of that is, but it's or the deeper meaning behind that. And I hope I don't get myself into trouble for sharing this.
Yeah.
But what my understanding of that is that when a woman reaches her natural age of menopause, things like hot flushes, things like headaches, all of these kind of things, like we've been given then that we don't have to have the headscarf. We can, be in a relaxed mode, be in a comfortable way. But again, that's something that I need to seek more clarification on.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah,
More
it'd be good to be able to
understanding
follow
on.
up with you on that at some point, because I think I just find this fascinating. I don't really see people for how they dress or what they wear. I see them from the heart of the conversation. So that's why I've never really sort of, I don't know, I feel really connected to a lot of Muslim women just because of my relationship, irrespective of, what we look like. So I'm just so super interested in this conversation on menopause. From your personal experience now, so you're a Muslim woman in the UK and you're taking workshops and you're talking about menopause. Does the relationship between being Muslim and menopause, does that conversation come up? Do other Muslim women approach you about that?
Yes, I have lots of Muslim women who approach me, and I didn't set up menopause talk for Muslim women. I just set up menopause talk to create spaces where women can come and talk about menopause. But it just so happened that all but about 2 or 3 women were all Muslim.
Yeah.
And then I realized, well, actually, there's a huge need for it. We don't talk about it. We just don't. We have like little snippets of conversations, but we don't go deep in. And I think it's that. I think there's also, with menopause, I don't know if you found this, Tracy, but there's a part of your life where you go through the denial of it.
Oh, yes.
Right? That it's not happening to me.
Well, the denial is related to aging, I think.
Yeah.
And I actually think that transcends any culture, any beliefs. It's that thing that we're exposed to. You need to look a certain way at a certain age, and if you don't, then you've done it wrong.
Yes.
That's kind of the message.
I was in Bangladesh. I went for a work trip last year. I was trying to remember when I went. It was not this year. I went last year because I do charity. I went with a charity, humanitarian aid charity, and we do international charity aid work. And so I was in Bangladesh. I went this year, but the previous year when I went, and I was having a conversation with a lady, and she was saying that we don't talk about menopause. Yeah. We don't want to accept that we're aging. We want our husband. We will go. No matter how much we're suffering, we will show up with our husband, and we will look the best that we can because we don't want to feel like we've lost our touch and that our husband's eyes or attention is going somewhere else towards a younger woman. And I felt really saddened by that.
Yeah, that makes me feel sad.
It's that element of like denial of the aging, and that I'm not going to look a certain way, I'm not going to be a certain way. And because we don't talk about menopause is seen as this really horrible, ugly, bad end of life stage that you're at, right?
Oh my God, yeah.
So we don't want to accept that we're going there, and so let's not talk about menopause, because if we don't talk about it, it doesn't exist then, does it?
Then it doesn't exist. I know. So what about, do you have Muslim women come to you and sort of sidle up next to you and go, hey, you know what, can we talk about this? Like, this is what I'm experiencing. Yeah. And I sort of feel like, okay, so irrespective of where you come from, what your background is, you're actually going to go through it. Like every woman on the planet, and some obviously will experience symptoms at a much harsher level than others, and 1 in 5 women will not really notice, right? Those 1 in 5 lucky, I don't know those people, but
Yeah, I talk about it, and people in my community, people who are familiar with whether it's on social media or whether it's through the radio, whatever it is, they will come up to me and say, "Do you know what? Can I have a chat with you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we don't talk about." And like, I think I'm going through menopause, but
nice.
it's like, okay, let's talk about this, and then they'll ask me, "Do you feel this? Do you feel this? Do you feel this?" And then they're waiting for me to say yes and yes and yes, and then validating those symptoms. Because it's a bit like, remember when I said to you, and you're having the periods and they're not validated?
Yeah.
Because then you don't think it's happening. You just get on with it. So they're waiting for somebody to validate and tell them that, yeah, actually, this is what it is. And another thing is that not everybody understands menopause.
Mm.
So you can't go and talk to everybody about it because you'll get a response. No, don't be silly. It's normal. I go through it.
Yeah.
But
No,
they're
I
not
agree.
linking it. Yeah, they're
Yeah,
not
I
linking
agree with you.
it to menopause.
Yeah.
So then we open up the conversation and then I make them comfortable. And I think another thing about like with I think particularly when I was saying about the modesty and with Muslim women, let's face it, let's talk about this, let's have this conversation. Intimacy, sexual intimacy during menopause. We know from women and we know from the research, we know from the information out there that sexual intimacy becomes very difficult for women because they have vaginal dryness.
Mm-hmm.
And vaginal dryness is a symptom of menopause.
Yeah.
And women don't want to talk about that.
No,
Because
I
talking about intimacy is again shame. You don't talk about it. And when I tell women in the workshops, like their faces just light up, like I gave them the solution to a lot of their problems. And I talk about Vagifem, which is the localized estrogen for the vaginal area. And when they don't want to talk about it, they don't want to open up, but I know that it's happening.
But they want to know.
Based on my own personal experience, but based on the studies and the research and everything that I'm going through. So then I say to them, like, you can go and have the conversation with your GP, your health practitioner, and then ask them to prescribe you with Vagifem. And then they're like, okay, so what is that? How does it work? And I was like, because let's face it, intimacy is not supposed to be painful.
Yeah. It's supposed to be enjoyable and you can do it for the rest of your life.
Pleasurable. Yeah. So if you are going through that, don't suffer silently. And because we don't have conversations around intimacy, they're not able to say to somebody else, like, I'm having this problem. Do you have the same?
Yeah.
Or I'm having this problem. Like, what do I do? Because I'm so dry down there. It's really like difficult. And then what does that do? That impacts the relationship.
Yeah. And everybody's happy in the home. Right? Yeah. Oh, well, I think you're amazing. Like you are sort of spearheading the way for a lot of conversations for Muslim women. I think just, opening up and talking about symptoms and in a very practical, matter-of-fact way. I think it's just like frame it from, this is your body, it is your hormones, this is the way life is, and this is what we can do to manage it so we don't have to be miserable. Like, life goes on and it gets really good from here. And I think once we're educated and understand it, you start to look forward to things again, right? You're not stuck in the mire of your symptoms and, is this what it's come to? Is this the rest of my life? Is it like so bad like this? It's like, actually it's a moment. And for some women up to, 10 years, maybe longer of symptoms, that's tough. But you've got the rest of your life to look forward to if you know how to manage your symptoms. Yeah. Right.
And when you do the age, Fiona refers to it as the menopause max, the menstruation and menopause max. You're going to be in menopause for about a good 30 years of your life. And you want it to be, it's the prime of your life. Yeah, you know how I describe it? You've got your period. Yeah. You go through life. Your estrogen levels are increasing, right? You're at your peak. Then they're going to start to decline. That's a rainbow. And at the end of that, you want to find the pot of gold. Right?
I love that analogy.
You want to find the pot of gold. So why should that decline part be gloomy, be miserable, be sad? It needs to be where you can talk about it openly. It needs to be where you can go and sit with the right people, the right medical professionals, have the right conversations, have the right treatment, bring openness into your relationships, all of those things. And there's another thing that I wanted to share actually, which has just come to my mind but with Muslim women. We talk about you don't feel connected. There's a disconnection that you feel. And like I said earlier, I felt like a stranger in my own life.
Yeah.
You don't feel connected. The things that used to excite you don't excite you. The things that you used to just kind of touch your heart, they don't.
Yeah, that
And
lack of joy.
That feeling of absenceness is there. So take a Muslim woman who prays 5 times a day and has a relationship, because that's the key thing, that 5 times a day that we pray at the appointed 5 different times throughout the day. It's that conversation that we have with God. It's that worship of God that we do. It's that showing up with God that we do. And it's, we're surrendering and submitting ourselves to Him. Now, when a Muslim woman goes through menopause, that sense of connection, spiritual connection with God, it's not there anymore.
Oh, wow. Okay. I mean,
It's gone.
I absolutely understand what you're saying. So I remember from a symptomatic perspective, I just felt a massive, sort of a lethargy. So all these little things that used to make me really happy just felt like they couldn't do it anymore. So I understand and appreciate what you're saying.
Yeah. So when the woman then isn't feeling that, she doesn't. Like for me, it happened, and I was like, I don't know what to do. But I was quite lucky because I surrounded myself with good teachers, knowledgeable women of Islam, and talking to them, they were able to say to me, "Well, actually, try this and try this."
Nice.
And when I went so Mecca is one of considered one of the holy lands where we go to do our pilgrimage, and I've been there. Pre-hysterectomy, I had been there 7 times, and each time this connection and the strength that I felt with God was so it was just so deep and strong. When I went February gone after hysterectomy in menopause, I was sad and I felt no connection.
Oh.
And I cried and I cried and I said, I don't know what's going on. And then it hit me, well, actually, you're in menopause, you've lost that sense of connection, that sense of joy, the things of there's this absence that you always feel, and this is what it is. But although when I did in March, I did a Ramadan and menopause workshop where we talked about spirituality and the relationship with God. And when I started to share my experience, I'm telling you, Tracy, the number of women who put their hands up and said, I feel the same, and I thought it was me. I thought I was bad. I thought I was wrong.
Yeah, you're giving them agency to express it, and that is probably one of the biggest taboos, is to say, hey, in my faith, I feel no connection. Like that's not just Muslim faith. I think that's any faith that you
any faith.
Where you
and that's why I say women of faith,
yeah, where you openly say, I'm not feeling it.
Yeah. And so we all had a good cry. The women were able to cry. And to hear women say that this is the first time I've been able to say this without the fear of being judged. Only because one woman stood up and said, I don't feel connected to God. But that doesn't make me a bad Muslim.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
you were saying things about, women who have joint pains. They're like, I can't do my prayer like I was used to. I was like, well, sit down and pray, because God permits us to sit on a chair and pray. We can even lie down in our bed and pray. We don't have to necessarily be standing and doing all the postures and things that we need to go through, the processes that we need to go through. And they're like, oh yeah, I never thought of that. And so what my workshop focused on was just reframing the understanding of the compassionate God that we have, and reintroducing him to you as a woman who is going through menopause. And you will find so many beautiful things about God and the ease, because our religion is meant to be easy. Islam is meant to be a very easy religion. man has made it complicated. And by man, I mean just generally, as in society and human beings have made religion complicated. But actually, any religion that you take is very simple. Very, very simple.
It should be a natural, integrated part of your life, right?
Absolutely.
So,
And so going back to the question that you asked, why women won't talk about it. Imagine trying to sit with your people, your community of people, your family, your extended family, your friends, or you're in a mosque, or you're in a mosque community gathering of women, and you're trying to say, well, I don't feel connected to God. Like the fear of, I'm going to be judged. Like, I'm not going to talk about it. There's no point, because nobody's going to get me. And all it takes is just one person to say, this is how I feel. And you will hear how many other women say, me too, and me. Oh, yeah, and me. Oh, I get that. You know?
Yeah. Aamilah, that's really, really special. I think that's going to resonate with a lot of people listening to this episode today. And while we're talking from a Muslim perspective, I actually believe a lot of women of faith, whatever their faith, will also feel that, for the last year I have felt a disconnection and I'm just going through the motions. I've heard that conversation as well. So I'm really, really grateful that you opened that up. You are so brave. And I love what you're doing with your community. And it's really special. This is a gift from God for you.
Thank you. That's so beautiful. That's really beautiful. Thank you for that.
Oh, well, I love this chat. And I'll just remind any of the listeners that they can give their feedback. If they're listening on Spotify, there'll be questions and polls to give their feedback. And of course, I'll pass that on to you, Aamilah.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Tracy, for having me.